Hey y'all, I'm Kelly Moody and you're listening to the Ground Shots podcast, an audio project exploring our relationship to ecology through conversations and storytelling with farmers, herbalists, craftspeople, naturalists, artists, and more. Hey, it's Kelly here. Welcome to episode 17 of the Ground Shots podcast. I'm still on the island of Kauai in the Hawaiian island chain. I'm actually right now waiting to pick up a friend at the airport in Lihui, probably the biggest town on the island. And I'm really excited about this episode. I'm fast forwarding one I did really recently here on the island. I've been doing my episodes kind of in generally the order that I record them, and waiting to do the ones I'm currently recording for later, but I just really felt inspired to push this one ahead. So this interview is with Paul Massey and Rob Cruz, two of the several people who organized the community-ran demonstration agroforestry project called the Kaua'i Food Forest. I'm going to read a little description from their website because they say it so eloquently what they do. So the Kaua'i Food Forest is a community-based subtropical food ecosystem located on Kauai's north shore in the Ahupua'a watershed of Kalihiwai, a project born from the collaboration of three nonprofit organizations: Regenerations Botanical Garden, Llama Kaua'i, and the Sanctuary of LUBOF. Regenerations is responsible for leading the ongoing design, planting, and maintenance of the forest. We are creating a constantly evolving, radiantly healthy forest ecosystem with nutritious, delicious fruit and other food items as a major output. The forest is intended to serve as an educational demonstration site where community members from Kauai and beyond can learn and innovate subtropical agroforestry techniques and management through practical hands-on experience. In addition, the forest is a renewable source of biological diversity for reproduction, distribution, and conservation. When I first got to the islands, my friend that I came here to visit directed me to the Food Forest Volunteer Day on Saturdays, and it was a really sweet way to jump right into engaging the land and helping work with plants here on this island. Of course, when I first got there, I realized, wow, I really don't know so many of these plants, and it's such a beautiful experience to come into a new place and be humbled by the amount of diversity that can be in one area, and really just not knowing very much, just taking in the plants. So I really appreciate being able to get my hands dirty there the month that I've been here in Kauai, and learn from the people who organize the food forest, including Rob and Paul here, who are two of the main organizers. There are several other people who are part of the kind of core collective too that have taught me a lot, even in just this short time, about this land. In this episode, we talk about subtropical agroforestry techniques, the reculturing and educational components of the food forest, the food forest as an important living seed bank for the community, the concept of guerrilla food planting, and the influence of colonization on Hawaiian land connection. We go a little bit into how the food forest started and where the food forest is going too. So I think that even if you never live in a tropical or subtropical place or never plan to visit one, that what you will find in this interview will still be really helpful wherever you are and whatever land that you live on. I think that the agroforestry practices that they are doing at the Kaua'i Food Forest can totally be translated into other ecologies and other land projects and other kinds of land tending. So I invite you to take in this conversation with that in mind. Let's get to the episode and enjoy listening, y'all. Burn with the light that reveals our faces. Burn with the heat that will warm these places.
My name is Paul Massey, and I am gratefully one of the stewards of the Kaua'i Food Forest, and so glad to be having a chance to talk about it with you today.
Yeah, my name is Rob Cruz. I'm one of the original stewards of the food forest, also steward of the land, and grateful for having us and a chance to talk about our project and to share what we're doing and help spread the stoke.
Cool. So this food forest, maybe you could tell the people who are listening, like how big it is, maybe a context of like this island, because for me it's been really interesting being here and like learning about the geography of this island, and then like just to give like a picture to hone in onto this place, like where it is and what's really cool about being right here, and then we can talk about maybe like how it began.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool about being here is that it's that final part of the day when the birds are singing and we're finding ourselves sitting on a knoll looking over the food forest on this beautiful piece of land on the north shore of Kauai in the Hawaiian Islands. Kauai is the oldest of the main Hawaiian islands at about 5.5 million years old. This piece of land that we're on, where the food forest resides, is about 1.5 million years old, is the lava flow that created this land. And we are on the rainy windward side of the island. So we're at the part of the island that faces the trade winds, and that blows in a lot of the moist air from the ocean. And this is where, once that moist air backs up against the mountains behind us, is where the majority of the rainfall happens on the island. So we have cloudy skies a lot of times, a lot of rain, and that rain has really weathered the soil quite a lot. And so the soils here are poor from a fertility standpoint, but they have very good physical qualities to them. So for the enterprising planter, by re-energizing the soils with mineral amendments and manures and other amendments like that, compost, organic matter, we can make soils that are very productive, and we get a lot of rainbows too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this is a really special spot. The project's 7 years in the making, and it's a community-ran agroforestry demonstration site for the island and the world, I feel. Paul's nonprofit Regenerations is the anchor that holds the whole project down, and behind his leadership, there's been a really solid, dedicated group of stewards that have built this project. And I feel one thing that's given us the advantage to be able to be innovative is, since it's a nonprofit, we don't have to focus on making money, and that has given us the opportunity to step back and look at collections and look at how to make fertility, how to build soil, how to bring back the maintenance, and how to really work with the plants and kind of just watch and learn instead of having to pump something out, you know what I mean? So that's been one of the gifts of this project, I feel. And since it's a community effort, we're always learning from each other, and we're all taking up our own specialties and bringing that to the table and learning from each other in that way. So yeah, it's been like a really special time of my life so far, and I hope we're just getting started.
Awesome. So for people who don't know what a food forest is or what agroforestry is, maybe you could describe that in the context of this project, like just a little bit more, because I know even me being a plant person, at some point I didn't know what that was too. So,
well, agroforestry is a new name for an old concept, and a general definition could be a farming practice where trees play a foundational component to the system. And the systems can be simple, incorporating only a few species of production, to very complex. There are different types of agroforestry systems. Some incorporate animals as part of the production. Some of them are focused on timber crops, some are focused on food crops. And so specifically the agroforestry system that we've developed is a multi-story food system. And so the multi-story refers to the vertical alignment or the vertical composition of the forest, mimicking climax forests from tropical areas that have very tall trees that form the climax canopy, and then trees that are nestled in underneath them, forming subcanopies, and then having shrubs and ground covers underneath them, rooting plants, vines climbing up, and of course, being organic systems, have what's called the fungal layer, so all of the different mushrooms that connect the plants in so many ways. So in our food forest, we've tried to mix up the diversity as much as we possibly can. We love the new and interesting, as well as the cherished traditional cultivars of Polynesian crops that have been grown in Hawaii for centuries. And so by blending them together in new combinations, we're discovering mutualistic relationships that either we're rediscovering or perhaps we're discovering for the first time, because there are so many useful tropical plants that some of the combinations we're coming up with may not have been tried before. It's really not that hard to imagine. And here in Hawaii, we have an amazing palette of plants, an ability to access new plant diversity or time-tested plant diversity and put them in combinations and then manage them in ways where we can come up with a system that is pest and disease resistant, weed resistant, and having productivity from all these various layers, so that when it's time to come together for our weekly lunches that we do here, that there are ingredients, all the various ingredients eventually will be able to be coming from the forest itself. Living in the tropics, we can be growing, for instance, black pepper, chocolate, vanilla, all of the spices you might imagine, whether they be born on trees or if they're herbaceous plants. We can grow plants from temperate areas as well as all the kinds of plants that could only be grown in a greenhouse if you lived in a temperate clime. And so it's a really special place to be a plant lover, because you can have this deep and intimate relationship with plants from all over the world.
Yeah, and one thing I really think is a beautiful part of our system and community, I think you kind of touched on, Paul, is watching the people that are coming at it from the food side and looking at this and being introduced to so many new plants that they're just so excited to learn how to cook, And I feel in this last few years we've really hit a stride with that, and some new people have been joining us, and they're just taking all of these amazing plants and getting so creative and feeding it back to us, and really just being so inspiring in that way. It's like, how many ways can you eat coconut? a lot. Comes to find out. And yeah, like ulu season's coming, and these girls really know how to utilize it now. It's not their first rodeo. So it's exciting to see us kind of fold these plants into our lives that way, So
creating new cultural means with the combinations that you're growing here too.
Oh yeah, completely new, I would say. I mean, the way that they are doing it and the boundaries that they're pushing in our own little cultural dish here is pretty impressive. I'm lucky to eat that.
The tradition.
Oh, it's
Hawaii, right?
Absolutely.
For sure. Many of the tropical food plants have very effective defense mechanisms, i.e. toxins that need to be neutralized through proper preparation, whether it is peeling away the skin that's toxic, or it's cooking it for long enough that the toxin is neutralized by the heat of the cooking, as just a couple of examples. So you really need to know, and certainly the indigenous cultures throughout the Pacific that have used these plants and really around the world did all of the super rough, hardcore experimentation on eating these things before we ever showed up. And yet it is our responsibility to pass along those traditions in the best way we can, so that people can be safe when they're eating their food, and expand their palate, because so many of the plants that we grow, while we are willing to fuss over some of the plants in the food forest because they're so special, by and large, we want to identify food plants that are easy for us to grow, that absolutely love our particular microclimate niche, and that we don't have to fuss over. And we want to then share that planting material with other people so that they can have easy food. And for those of us who are transplants in Hawaii, who were not born and raised here and do not come from the traditional cultures of the Pacific, many of these foods are new, they're strange. If you don't know how to prepare them, you're more likely to just go with what you know, and go to the supermarket and get. But so that's one of the challenges and the opportunities for us and others in Hawaii who are working to make these quote-unquote strange tropical foods available and accessible to the masses, is that we have to teach people how to use them.
Yeah, it's a reculturing. I think is what keeps on coming up, because it's such an opportunity. I mean, to see how valuable these plants were in those cultures, because they were just so limited on what they had access to, and now we have access to everything in the world. Why wouldn't we be just completely obsessing about this, right? So I feel like it's just a really big opportunity for us, and to rebuild those relations. And now we're also building relations with other seed stewards that are introducing different plants to us, and give us plants to make sure, really, to a lot of the times, to experiment, see if it works here, see what can stick, and what can we bring to the table as far as like new food for our futures.
Yeah, y'all are doing some seed saving kinds of experiments here too. Not experiments, but like.
Yeah, the practice of seed saving is crucial to what we do, and seed companies are great, and many gardeners it's easier for them, or they're just pleased to continue to support their seed companies, and each year go and purchase seeds again and again rather than save their own seeds. And that's fine. We need seed companies out there, because the conservation, the perpetuation of so many of the varieties of food plants is hugely supported by commerce in seeds. And so that's a very important thing. And there's something really important for a local region to be saving its own seeds. Here in Hawaii, we are obviously remotely located compared to many of the seed sources around the world. And so it's easy, like so many of the resources that we use here in Hawaii, to be lulled into a sense of false security that we will always have access to them. When we begin to save our own seed, it's a backup system in a sense, but it's also an opportunity to begin to select what you like too. And so it's another level. And if some gardeners never take the seed saving plunge, it doesn't mean they can't have a wholly enjoyable and fulfilling experience growing their own food. And if you do the seed saving trip, I won't say it's a deeper level, but it's another dimension. It's another facet of the experience. And certainly having seeds stored up, in jars and storage, and being able to pull those seeds out, as we've been doing recently, of seeds we saved many years ago, and returning to varieties that were successful for us.
In this place, too.
In this
Adapted
place,
to this
yeah,
place.
right in this place. Now, adaptation, whether or not we see a truly adapted seed after just 1 or 2 generations is questionable, but if it made it even to the first time you saved seed, that's a major milestone, because some plants will grow great vegetatively, but you won't get seed from them. If it makes seed at least once, then it's telling you that it's at least somewhat suitable for your environment. Just before we started recording, we were looking at some new plant diversity that we were gifted by our friends Delana and Mario at Peace Seedlings, and it's some small Andean tubers called uyuko, and from what we read about them on the amazing Cultivariable website, which is a source of these tubers as well, they have a very narrow environmental range, and it's probably going to be too hot for us here in the food forest to have a great success with this plant, but we're going to try it anyway. We'll see if we can grow it. But then we also have the opportunity, because we were able to sprout a whole tray of them, to share them with some of our other gardening friends around the island. And here on the island of Kauai, while we find ourselves in the sort of hot lowlands, subtropical lowlands, we have upper regions at elevation of 5,000 feet or 3,500 to 4,000 feet elevation, where people have gardens. And so thinking about people who have gardens up in that much cooler areas and getting these tubers to them and seeing how they have, what kind of luck they have. So the food forest is it's kind of a hub where we can share these varieties. People will come and go and come and be able to visit the plants that they've gifted us in the past. And then, but it's really just, rather than maybe the hub of the wheel, it's a spoke. And all these other gardens and farms around the island are other spokes in the wheel. And so we, what we can't do here, what doesn't want to thrive here, will probably thrive in another area of the island, or simply in the hands of another person who's paying enough attention to that plant and has figured out what that plant needs. So,
What are some other varieties that you have saved seeds and propagated here?
I think one of the big ones that was in the beginning was Ethiopian Kale. It was like a blue kale for us, and we don't get seed of, like, let's say Dino Kale or Curly Kale or any of these other ones. So for us, that was one of our big time pioneer plants. At one time, the food forest was just one solid hedge of kale. It was pretty wild. So it was like an in-between stage, and that's kind of big, one of our really good pushers, and huge amounts of food. The flowers seem to stick around for a long time, can take a lot of cutting, and kind of like a good asparagus. You can eat the tops like asparagus, and just a really just bulletproof green for us over here. And we were able to save a lot of that seed and just get it going again and again. We just put it back in for the first time. We haven't utilized it in years. But now, since we have so much light in the forest again, we can bring back in these things that we kind of successioned out years ago when the forest was young. So that was a big one. I think the pumpkins were really big. We had a big success of kombucha, kind of Japanese kind of pumpkins, right? And they ran, and we saved seeds, and we've been kind of experimenting with those and putting those back. And yeah, those are some of the highlights for me. How about you, Polly?
well, papayas is a seed-borne plant here, so that's hugely important. We're getting back to some of the Thai, a particular variety I collected in Thailand a number of years ago, and we grew out at the food forest with incredibly sweet yellow flesh, is one that we have in our nursery right now. So seeds in the traditional sense, something you can dry and stick up on the shelf and come back to. We do have quite a few varieties, beans, and a lot of diverse native plants have seeds. But when it comes to a lot of the food plants, they're vegetatively propagated. And so if you look at the canoe plants, or the plants that the Polynesian voyagers and settlers brought around the tropics: banana, taro, breadfruit, sweet potato, many more. These are vegetatively propagated, so it's not really a seed in the traditional sense or in the precise sense, but it really essentially is a seed. So if you think about a little banana sprout, a little pup, they're called, that's really your seed, right? Because it's, if you want to establish a new planting of bananas, you're going to need planting material. So sometimes we do use that word seed in the more general sense for vegetative cuttings. And so the food forest, while we do have traditional seeds in dried storage, we also have the food forest as a living seed bank, because so many of the plants are vegetatively propagated, and you have to keep them growing all the time so you can have this material. And a lot of the ones we love, we grow by the hundreds or thousands even. So coleus,
we went big on coleus.
sisu spinach, comfrey.
And I think one of the big things about that, Paul, is Paul hosted a seed exchange for what? Was it like 7-9 years? So since Paul was hosting that seed exchange, he was able to like collect planting material and kind of call on the community. So whenever this project was ready to go in, we had a whole community of people that were used to gathering in the name of plants, you know, and they were used to bringing their planting material together and all that stuff. So it was like he had the call to arms kind of bell ready and already primed. And that was one of the unique things, that we were able to jump ahead of, you know, how many years of collecting it would have took one person to collect all the plants that we just started with. And then from there, we like tripled it, you know, as far as diversity. Yeah. And that's because Paul's hosting seed exchanges.
And Rob says Paul was hosting the seed exchange, but all of those seed exchanges were huge community efforts, of
Paul
which I was
pulling
one.
Them together. Yeah.
Any one of the 17 seed exchanges that we held,
17.
There were at least 8 to 10 people who did a huge role in putting on that seed exchange. We've been taking a break now for a few years.
Well, like we were saying, the food forest is the living seed bank now. It's holding it. We're not keeping it in a locker and then bringing it back out biannually. Now we host every weekly, and that's where the energy has went. You know, the energy hasn't went on pause. We've been just busting ass in a different way.
Being the humans tending the seed bank.
Tending the seed bank, yeah, making a food forest. This is our living seed bank now, because you could have those seeds, but if you don't know how to take care of them, they're worthless. And also, like he's saying, a lot of these are vegetatively propagated, so if we're not holding them like in living gardens, then they're not going to be around. So, and we're learning how to do that better and better as far as in this system. Yeah.
I like how so y'all have a Saturday volunteer day. Mm-hmm. And then people eat lunch, which I've volunteered a couple Saturdays. There's been a lot of foods from the food forest in the lunch, which has been really cool.
Yeah.
And there's a teaching element to it, like a sharing of knowledge, that maybe you'll plant a seed, you know, of information in someone's head that they'll take with them, whether they have land to tend or like garden or not. And so I think that's really cool too, that it's also a place to plant seeds in that way.
Right. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's, you know, we have work and it needs to get done. So on a certain level, if people are coming to volunteer, we got to teach them how to do it, right? We do aspire to, you know, in our perfect dream, the person who comes to volunteer at the food forest is like a huge light bulb goes off in their head and they go, oh my God, I have to do this. And I think that some of the people who we have been the most inspired by are people who you could term a planter. It doesn't even matter where. It's great if they have their own farm. It's great if they have their own yard. But a planter is just going to be planting shit everywhere. Yes. And so I know that myself personally, I'm greatly inspired by these people who just get that light bulb gets turned on in a big way for them. We have fellow Kauaians who, you know, cruise around with avocado pits and just kind of like slow down on a country road and just start throwing avocado pits off into the ditch. And even if only 1 out of 20 of those avocado pits takes, there's going to be an avocado tree there or a coconut or whatever. They might be sort of guerrilla planting in a very basic sense like that.
It's obviously responsibly done too. You're not going to be planting albizia here.
We're hoping,
Albizia
yes.
doesn't need any help.
I think people kind of get, I think people who go to an effort like that are trying to make a positive difference in a sense. Yeah. And there are, anytime we modify the environment, there are cascading effects from that kind of thing. So avocados, as an example, can bring pigs into the area, wild pigs. And so if those wild pigs are digging under the avocado tree, that could cause erosion. So yeah, there are always bigger issues to consider in a sense. But when it comes to a place where, 9 out of every 10 bites of food is imported into the locale, when this place could be a huge net exporter of food, and we are a huge net importer of food. Any attempts to increase our food security and diversity on that level of availability around the island, bring it on.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we're learning how to do, is we're learning, and how I like to see it is we're learning how to make systems that we could forage, farm, and hunt in. Like I could go in there and find mushrooms or find something that I completely didn't plan on planting. There's plenty of stuff that we did plant, and if I want to go over there and tack out some chickens or catch a pig, we can do it if we put enough effort into it.
When is our next wild chicken stew there, Rob? I've been missing it.
They were asking me to bring some equipment tomorrow, so we'll see what happens if we can arrange some rice.
This guy makes a killer chicken stew.
Like from the feral chicken.
Just the feral chicken.
That's something that I didn't know about before coming here. I didn't know there was
chickens everywhere.
We just heard one. It's probably going to be the recording.
That's part of our island. It's a chicken island. It's the bird island.
Not all the islands have.
No, just Kauai. That's one of our things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the things I did wanted to say is kind of like we hit on, the reason why we have 98% imported food, the same exact percentage as every other county in the United States, is because we have the same exact diet. And most of our diet is all processed and European based. Mm-hmm. So to relearn the plants that are here is it's a completely cultural shift. So not only are we learning how to make the systems and build the fertility, but we're learning how to eat and preserve the food. So really that's why doing this together is so rewarding, because you're doing exactly the kind of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
That was something that I've been thinking about a lot since I did a permaculture training like a month ago in California. It was at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, and they really emphasized the intersection of cultural and ecological health being kind of hand in hand. And part of that's learning the Hawaiian, the Hawaiian plants, a lot of them are canoe plants, which were brought over thousands of years of time, and some of them are endemic and native. That's something that's really blowing my mind, being here, the layers of that here. But I guess thinking about how tending the land is like an act in that way of how it can harbor cultural and ecological health. You're improving the soil, you're improving the land by increasing diversity, and it's kind of honoring the Hawaiian culture here too, and which I think is really important.
And our community too, I feel like we're holding that light for the community, as far as they know we're doing that work, and they can come here and learn and collect material and collect support for their own projects. They know that we have the labor and the people looking to work on these kind of projects and everything like that. So
and Hawaiian culture is alive and well here on the island of Kauai. And not that you said the wrong thing in any regard, but the native planters and the ones who live now that we know, they are also our mentors. While we may have some knowledge that is different from, or we may have technical training that exceeds some of the native planters, the energy with which they do it, the connection that they have with the Aina, the land here, will always be at the vanguard. It will always be a mentor to us in that relationship. And it's so exciting to be, as a non-native person, to be in a land, in a place where the native planters will accept you when you show how true your heart is to this service. And there are so many opportunities to nurture and perpetuate these traditional varieties and then make them available to the native planters. These opportunities bring the whole community together. They draw together the community in a way that couldn't happen without the plants, couldn't happen without these environmental components, and couldn't happen without the true aloha of the Hawaiian people. It's a magnificent thing to experience. It takes slowing down and being quiet and listening and learning and following along with some of that traditional knowledge and practice. And while we don't have right now, we don't have any regular native planters who work with us in the food forest. When they come to visit, is always a highlight for us. And to a person, the native planters who come are amazed at what we've accomplished and give us the shaka and give us the thumbs up and say keep going, and are happy to step away with plant material.
Right.
And for us, it's just the greatest honor to be visited by someone who has a multi-generational tie to this land, whose ancestors are part of the legends of this land. It's so humbling and so amazing to be part of this present moment of perpetuating these traditions and sharing and learning.
Yeah. Some of the plants, I guess, the imported food plants culturally, like breadfruit, which you said is about to come in season.
Ulu, yeah, breadfruit.
I'm starting to learn the Hawaiian names, which is important, right? To say the Hawaiian names of the plants.
Yeah.
Some of them, maybe y'all can elaborate on this. There's certain plants that have a hard time because of a lot of things that have been brought here, that like ornamentals, right, that are super invasive or outcompete the plants that have been traditional food plants, even though many of them were brought as canoe plants, right?
I would think most of it's been just dropped out of cultural practice and cultural tending because they're not, connected to the land anymore, and the different generations and eras of the sugarcane and the pineapple industry, those eras had a lot of influence as far as a completely change of diet, and was introduced a lot more processed food. And with that, once the break happens, then they lose the plant connections to the plants and stuff, and into the gardens that will hold them.
Right. And when Rob says that the connection to the land was lost, he doesn't just mean they changed their attitude about it. The Hawaiian people were actually separated from their land, like so many indigenous cultures around the world, by the introduction of land ownership from the Europeans. And the land was stolen from the Hawaiians on so many levels for so many years in so many situations. And so it's really that, to be clear, it wasn't the Hawaiians' choice to rice is better, and then they put down the poi bowl. They were the lands that nurtured these special food plants was taken away, and the cultivation methods for taro or kalo in Hawaiian are so exacting and precise for the flooded field cultivation, similar to rice paddies, but uniquely Hawaiian, that when the Hawaiians were separated from those special microclimate environments, it's very hard to recreate that in other landscapes. Whereas something like breadfruit tree you will find them persisting even, a plant that is grown from vegetative cuttings. You can find trees in the forest that are remnants from maybe when a Hawaiian family lived next to that breadfruit tree, because they keep coming up as root suckers. And so the tree you see probably wasn't there exactly, but it could be from the same rootstock, just perpetuating in the same area. So depending on the types of plants, they can persist. And yet you are also correct that some of the invasive plants that have come in, often ornamental originally in nature, or even just accidentally introduced, or introduced as a soil conservation plant during the huge deforestation times of a century and more ago, when cattle had denuded whole mountainsides. And
cattle.
And so there was a decision to reforest, and unfortunately, back in the time, the forestry department thought, let's use non-native plants because they will cover the land faster. And if only they had collected ohia seed and koa seed and so many other of the native tree seeds and thrown them out the window of the or out the the cargo door of the airplane, which is how they seeded many of the mountainous areas of this island, we would have much larger tracts of land still in native forest. But instead, they use non-native plants, and now, yes, they have crowded out many of the indigenous and endemic plants of the islands.
I was at the Princeville Botanical Gardens this morning.
Oh, really?
She pointed out a tree that she's like, oh, in the war they threw this one out because they thought they were going to be in
Java plum,
combat. Here, it was some palm, I think, and they were like, it's just around because they threw them out of planes thinking they needed more coverage so that if we were in combat, you couldn't see people down there.
Oh, wow.
But then combat never happened, but she's like, but we've been fighting that tree ever since.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Just remember that.
Could have been. I've not heard this.
I think it was a Java plum,
Java plum. Is that that's a palm?
No, Java plum is it's a relative of guava, and many other tropical plants that we love, Suriname cherry, jaboticabas, and all kinds like that. It's sort of an acquired taste, but once you fall in love, they're really good.
So it is edible.
But they're edible. They are invasive in drier areas. But there is a fungus that has come in, and now the Java plum is dying back. But then there's just another invasive plant that doesn't have an edible fruit that's ready to take its place. Yeah. So it's a challenge.
It's kind of a crazy game out there in the forest right now, as far as all the invasives. So
Indeed.
It is. I mean, that's what happened, and as far as like the landscape was cleared so far down that there's just the chance for all these invasives just to kind of get in there, and the conditions are so ripe for it. We have all the different invasives from all over the world and so much light and water, so it's just like a perfect storm for that. So, but I mean, I'm trying my best to learn my natives, and we have natives in here in the different farms that we're working on, and they're beautiful. We're so unique here. Yeah,
so
very,
endemic,
very magical plants here.
Like a lot of endemic plants in the Hawaiian Islands in general, right? And maybe
yes.
Most of
and
them.
And here on Kauai, there are the largest number of single island endemic plants that are found on only a single island. 230 or something like that plant species that are only found on this island in the whole world. Now they have relatives on the other islands, but they are distinct enough that botanists have described them as separate species. The flower color is different, the leaf shape is different. Now if you bring these plants all into the same area, and there is a pollinator that shares their pollen between them, you probably would come up with hybrids. So is a distinct species really a species that can't mate with another species? Not so much in the plant world. There are all these highly restricted areas where the genetic material couldn't pass on to the next valley because of the steep cliffs, or because the wind didn't blow that way, that kind of thing. And now in Hawaii, because these native plants are becoming so more uncommon, rare, and threatened with extinction, conservation within farms and gardens becomes more important. Ultimately, if possible, conserving rare and endangered plants in their native ecosystems is the most important goal. We want these plants to be capable of regenerating themselves in the wild and shouldn't be relegated just to managed gardens. But in some cases, having cultivation in the gardens is a very important backup, at least, backup strategy.
Right.
But it's also a wonderful chance for people to meet these native plants, because the only place they grow is on the top of a mountain that no one would ever get to.
Which is why they're still there, too, right?
Exactly. And so increasing the appreciation of these plants by people actually having a one-on-one experience with them. And then for us, as a food forest, and not just food, but medicinal plants, then with such a large selection, some 1,500 native plant species for all the Hawaiian Islands, for us to be able to select some of the species that are used in medicine or have a particular cultural value or beauty to them, is a great opportunity for us to, again, incorporating that traditional Hawaiian culture, and then also turn people on to wanting to grow these plants themselves. Give you a perfect example. So we grow in the food forest. We have a few individuals of the Llama Tree, Lama. Llama is the native persimmon or native ebony tree. And this tree actually makes an edible fruit. It's very small, but it's pleasant to eat. And the tree is gorgeous. It has a black bark, although it is in the ebony family. The wood of the tree is actually lighter in color. From a cultural perspective, Llama is the physical manifestation of the goddess Laka. And Laka is the goddess of the forest and the goddess of hula. So to plant this tree in the food forest, we are inviting the spirit of the goddess of the forest into our forest. And you'd think with such a fantastic and amazing story, people would be growing llama trees everywhere. They're highly ornamental,
gorgeous. Black
bark, red new growth, orange fruit. They're almost unknown in cultivation. And there's no explanation for it other than people just never paid attention to the fact that this incredible plant, which is actually not threatened in the wild from a sort of official title, but it is becoming, like so many native plants, less and less common. There is less and less young establishment of the next generation.
It's not a canoe plant, right?
It is not.
endemic.
No, it is endemic to the Hawaiian Islands, and it's something that should be a common street tree.
Right.
And so a great opportunity for our small conservation project to introduce people to this plant. It is slow growing. It takes patience if you want to enjoy a llama tree in its fullness. These trees can live for hundreds of years. Nobody really knows how long they can live. In the tropics, we don't get the same rings inside a tree that tell us the annual growth because we don't have that hard winter. And so the rings instead could show, oh, there was a drought. But the drought doesn't happen every year, so you're not going to have the same kind of rings every year. So, and yet I think it would be safe to say that these trees easily grow for hundreds of years, because sometimes in the forest, in the native forest, a seedling tree that's only, say, a foot tall could be in the shade of other trees and stay the same size for decades so you could look at a tree that's a foot tall and go, yeah, that tree's 30 years old. It's just been waiting for a gap of light until it takes its next period of growth. So a fully mature tree that you can climb into could be 600 years old. It could be 1,000 years old. We really don't know. And of course, the sooner we plant them, the sooner we will have these amazing trees to pass on to our children and our grandchildren.
It's awesome. We've been able to really have build so many connections with all these different plants and the different collections that we have. Let it be. Paul has a taro collection. We've been collecting the uhi yams, the Hawaiian yams.
Oh, we ate that, I think, a couple Saturdays.
Yeah, and that thing's just
good.
it's a beast. It's a monster. It wants to grow here, and it gives like ridiculous amounts of food, you know. And what other fun collections? Bananas. We've been trying to revitalize our banana collection. Yeah, I think that's been one of the really cool things is being able to just find these diversified, these just different characteristics that are just going to just show themselves niches and kind of teach us different ways to utilize these plants, you know. And I think that's been one of the really cool parts. It's just really it's been almost like my college as far as school plants go, you know. You just learn so much and have so much more exposure to plants than you would have in any other kind of scenario, you know. So it's been really an amazing experience in that sense. Yeah.
They said something at the permaculture training, like what the hands do, the heart remembers, right? So like even last weekend you were teaching us really specifically how to care for these plants that you've been nurturing. Yeah. It's like really like and doing it literally and working
repetition,
with the plants.
Yeah.
It's like you're really learning so much.
Yeah, you learn so much more.
And doing the motions of like caring for them.
Exactly. Repetition, and I feel like that's how I feel sometimes, asking, well, how do you say that? How do you say that? How do you say that? So much repetition, trying to learn some of these words. Names. Yeah, they're a little challenging, but you know, that's how we learn, is just being around people that inspire us and, you know more than us, and yeah, helps us grow. And it's been a really amazing place to grow plants and community. It's really what it's stuck out to me in the last big block of time that we've been doing this together. Yeah.
And one thing we haven't mentioned is our focus on building the soil. So I did mention in the beginning remineralizing the earth here, but really a focus on the organic matter. And Rob earlier touched on the concept of succession, which is really fun to work with in a forest system. The concept in the beginning is that we have a disturbance event, like you would have in a natural. There might be a fire, or a landslide, or bark
flood,
beetles
tillage.
Might come in and like eat all the trees. And so you have a radical change in the environment, and then you'll have what are termed pioneer plants that come in and colonize the area first. And then they give way to a second wave, and then a third wave, and maybe multiple waves of different plant communities that come in, eventually winding up with a climax community until another disturbance event happens. So this is the natural system, and then we, as permaculturalists, like to entrain ourselves with those natural systems rather than kind of try to fight them. And dance with them. So our successional system started with the disturbance event of tillage and shaping the land. We put in a Berman Basin system. And then we remineralized the soil, and then introduced various successions or waves of different plant communities to build on each other and also to build the soil. So we planted a huge amount of nitrogen fixing trees and shrubs in the beginning that we then have mostly cut down at this point over various waves, and used all of that mulch, all of that chopped up plant material to feed the soil and feed the soil organisms, the microscopic and the macroscopic organisms. And now we're in a place where we have now chopped up most of what there is, and we have a new generation of these soil building plants in our nursery that we're tending here, because the environment is so modified with all of these invasive plants that we've been talking about before. If we just walked away from the forest now, it probably would get filled up with weeds, sadly. So we do need to continue to maintain and manage these relationships of the different plants, and decide which plants stay and which plants go. So we will actually be doing something that's a bit different than nature would be doing, which would be reintroducing some of the pioneer plants, even though we're kind of further along in the story, because we want to maximize yield. Because oftentimes when we eat the fruits and the foods from the forest, the waste products of consuming those fruits and vegetables is not redistributed back in the forest, aka we're not pooping in the forest. So all those nutrients are leaving, and we need to replenish them. And so now we're looking out in the wider environment and going, okay, where's our chop and drop coming from? And we're needing to drag branches from further and further away. But we're going to be reinvigorating those soil building plant communities back into the forest, restocking them, if you will. and
diversifying, really.
and diversifying as well.
Yeah, we're experimenting more with the coriandras. We didn't put a lot of those in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, we went, I would say, like in how fast they would go. We went something like pigeon pea, Suspania, Sesbin, Glaricidia, and Inga ice cream bean. And those were like the 4 or 5 plants that we were really working with. But coriandra is a new one that we're starting to experiment with. And then what's the other ones that we're looking at?
Well, we've got a couple more Sesbania of the grandifloras, which
the
actually
grandifloras also,
we put on the edges of the forest because they really need a lot more sun. But if we now start with them in some of the cultivated areas, then we can diversify like that. Then we have a white ball acacia, which we had a single tree, but we just collected seed of that.
These are all like pea family trees.
All, yes,
These are all of our
leguminous nitrogen fixing trees for sure.
Yeah, so these are the ones that we've played with.
Yeah, and then there's a red coriandra that we're going to be planting more of. It's really nice to utilize these different plants because some of them give more of a yield in the top growth that you wind up mulching with.
Right.
And other ones are more efficient at actually fixing nitrogen in their root systems in relationship with nitrogen-fixing soil bacteria. And it's just more interesting and fun to grow a spectrum of these nitrogen-fixing trees. And these nitrogen-fixing trees have different physical habits. They also have different growth speeds. And so through planting more diversity within the same plantings, we'll have a longer yield if we mix them up in the plantings. So
there was something, I forget the name of it, that is like I guess it's a permaculture technique, but you were telling me about it like last week or the week before, where you cut the tree halfway and it sprouts. You can't do that with everything, right? But
right. So that's called pollarding, and that's an ancient technique. I think it came from, I know certainly it was developed in Europe, but they might have even had a pollarding technique in Asia as well. And it's basically cutting the tree back to the same height on an annual basis. And then from that area that you're cutting, you get sort of a knot, like a fist, if you will, and then a bunch of sprouts will come out of that. And so this is a traditional technique used in Europe for making hedgerows and making basket materials and other things where you have a single year's whip growth that you, at a small diameter growth that you might use for construction as well as firewood. And this is differentiated from coppicing, which is when you cut it at the ground level. Pollarding is when it's up higher. And yes, so we do have some nitrogen fixing trees that we can manage in that way. Ice cream bean and Glaricidia would be 2. Then there are other trees, the Sesbanias, the Sesbin and the grandiflora. If you cut them way back, they don't really come back.
Done.
Yeah.
They're done. But that's okay if you plant enough of them.
That's the plan.
Then that's kind of the plan. And then the
Yeah.
root system of those plants is fixing a huge amount of nitrogen, but it's not going to let go of it until the tree dies.
Yeah.
It's holding on to it itself to utilize in flowering and fruiting process.
And then also, I think with once we kill those trees, not only the nitrogen, but how much activity it's creating in the soil as far as like the succession, because of how much life it creates. All the mushroom kingdom and all the bugs and everything just wakes up. And you could see it sometimes when we're just kind of going by. You could see where the lawnmowers will hit old roots that are kind of getting exposed, and there's just flushes and flushes of mushrooms coming out from lines of just dead roots in the ground, And we've killed a lot of trees in that forest, so there's a lot of dead roots.
Yeah,
in there.
the roots venture so far out from the trunk of the tree and essentially are like compost injection systems, because after that tree is dead, all of those roots are breaking down into compost underground,
Right.
where the long-term fruit trees and other productive plants send their roots into those root
boom, right
channels
into 'em.
and eat all of that compost
Right.
and any of the nitrogen that was
Right,
stored.
so all that work those trees were doing is just food for everybody else.
Yeah.
And then another thing that it took us a little while to figure out how to do is our gilding. And like we were kind of like joking, we go big on the comfrey. And I think one of the things that we had to figure out with the chop and drop and all of our nitrogen fixers is, what do we do with all the sticks? What do we do with all these sticks in the beginning? And I remember I was kind of like drag heel about it in the beginning. I'm like, let's just leave it everywhere. And then it turns into a big mess and you can't walk on it. So the comfrey's been one of our big things. If we just have our big lines of comfrey, we could put all the chop and drop behind it, and then the comfrey kind of just eats it and takes it down and keeps it nice and cool. And then all the mushrooms could take care of it and everything from there. We don't have to trip all over it. So making a food forest system that is, how high you want to cut your trees, what you're going to do with all your chop and drop after, what your ground covers are going to be, so you don't have to fight every weed that is going to come up. There's a few things that I feel like are just big time learning curves that we've overcome.
Right. Your use of comfrey is really interesting because I see that in a lot of different gardens all over, like California, where I spent a lot of time. Also in the South, like comfrey is sort of like a staple permaculture farm. And sometimes I've seen it kind of get really invasive. You said that maybe you don't use a variety here that does that. It seems to be where you put it, right?
I don't think I don't think.
Well,
ours
you're in a
doesn't
place
move
where
around.
everything else is also like
It's
There are
rigorous.
so fast.
I think the reason it becomes invasive for people in a more of a garden or a farming situation is when it gets into the beds and then it gets tilled and those roots get chopped up into a million pieces, and then it becomes a weed in the cultivated bed areas. And that would be a very real problem for us in Hawaii as well. But because we're not doing that level of cultivation in the forest, we're not tilling, but we're planting these thick border plantings around our plant guilds with a fruit tree in the center of the guild, or multiple fruit trees, and then the other guild members within ultimately the comfrey ring. The comfrey stays where we plant it, and then as the trees get older and they shade the ground more, the comfrey is sort of dying back and disappearing, really.
Yeah.
So as long as we don't go through with a tiller, we should be good.
Right.
But we still have left a couple of areas in the food forest that are tillable. And in fact, I had described earlier the Berman Basin system. The basins have become our long, on-contour walkways. Not to say that we don't have other paths that pass through perpendicular to or transect those basins. But the basins are areas that we are mowing at this point because we have more light in the forest now that we've cut down our canopy of nitrogen fixing trees, which we needed to do to give the fruit trees sufficient light so that they could form a good strong shape.
Yeah, we were getting some ugly looking trees when we weren't taking care of them.
They were stretching out for lack of sun. So,
we learned.
But we're correcting that.
Marshall told me to mention just the human maintenance element and how y'all are playing with that. Like, how can you minimalize certain aspects of human maintenance?
Yeah, yes. And that's a big thing that we're talking about right now. Like, our comfrey is one of the big ones, and putting our sticks in the right spot so we don't have to weed our mulch. Right. That's a huge one. That one was kicking our butt for a while. And then the other big one is sishu. Sishu spinach is a really big plant for us in our gilding, as far as holding the ground together and matting really good so that the other weeds cannot get light, because everything's runs off of sunlight, right? So we gotta try to make as much shade as we can, as fast as we can, and with plants that are easy for us to maintain,
One big piece that we missed in the beginning was durable ground covers that could take the place of grass. I mean, the food forest is beautiful when it gets a fresh mow and humans love grass. So, humans love a good lawn. So we kind of have lawn in our pathways, and when it's mowed, it's beautiful. But it takes a lot of maintenance, and we're burning gas, and it's every week, and it's time and effort.
That's why Marshall's saying
all that kind of thing. So if we had somebody in our hui who had a whole bunch of perennial peanut in the beginning, and we had known, we didn't even really understand like we do now what the forest was going to look like in 6 years and how we could have designed it in a little more sensibly.
Yeah.
But if we had used that, also geeking out on plants a little bit, Rob sent me a picture of the Sarwack Bean.
Yes.
Which was, it's a long story, but it's another ground cover that we have experimented with, but we kind of lost it. And so Rob just sent me a photo yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, he's got it. So we have planting material for this ground cover again, another plant that doesn't need to be mowed or weed whipped. And so if in the pathways we had really good combinations of ground covers like that, and those two examples actually also fix nitrogen, so that's a bonus, something grass doesn't do. And that really leads me to that idea that while we continue to love on and learn so much from this food forest, it's impossible not to dream about what would we do for the next food
and that's
forest?
why we're telling you guys, so you guys could learn from
what kind of mistakes would we correct, or what kind of opportunities would we take the next time around?
And one of the big things I felt like the ground cover was one of the things that we were trying to figure out in the beginning, and we stumbled on sweet potato, because sweet potato was oh my God, it was beautiful,
insane,
it grows so ridiculous. But there were the two problems. I mean, the first problem was it only lasts about 1.5 years, and then the leaves start to kind of dwindle. You know what I mean? As far as just kind of like getting seasoned out.
Because they were filled with potatoes. There were potatoes everywhere.
But we couldn't find the potatoes. We weren't really good at finding the potatoes. And then the other thing is the pigs came in and found all the potatoes. And then they just left like all these holes in our system, So that was like a big time problem for us, is we didn't know how to eat our tubers fast enough, and our tuber was our ground cover, which was a big no-no. So that's why like the sishu is a bomber, because the pigs have no interest in it, and it mats really well, and it doesn't get weak, and it's edible, and it propagates like gangbusters. So it's like,
but it's not perfect.
It's not perfect.
It doesn't make an impenetrable barrier to weeds.
Right.
But really, no ground cover here does.
That's one of the best ones we've gotten.
It all takes some kind of maintenance
and experimentation to see what's going to work. Yeah. I mean, I think in the best case scenario would us being like a combination of probably two different ground covers, because what I'm seeing is they need to mat correctly. They need to mat really well, so the other things can't get inside there. We have a lot of ground cover. We have a lot of weeds that go laterally. So if something can grow through it laterally, like some kind of like plant snake, we're done. We're going to be weeding that thing out forever. So that's what we got to do. That's why we use the comfrey borders, because those plant snakes don't go through that. That's our border.
The grass from coming in.
Yep, exactly.
Really cool.
So that's yeah. Write that down, kids.
Well, this is tropical, and where I grew up is subtropical, I guess I'd say. So we have a winter where things freeze and everything dies down. Yeah. But there is it's from March until October, November, depending on what zone you're in, mountains versus the Piedmont or something. There's definitely some similar problems, and then as soon as the fall comes, things get knocked down. Not to say the kudzu is just hanging out waiting, until the warmth comes back, and then it's crazy again. But which gives you an opportunity to dig up the
roots, you can find it.
Like that. Yeah, but there's still the issues of figuring out how to deal with the constant growing green and the humidity and the sun and the rain. I don't know what it's like here all the time, but it rains every day or every other day. It's like that too all summer in Appalachia. It could rain every single day. It could rain a couple times a week. It's just constant. So similar problems, some similar solutions, some different solutions, but it's so interesting.
You probably have wild pigs too, yeah?
I don't want to. I think in some areas, but we didn't have an issue with that where I was.
Good.
I feel like that's one of the great
Bless
things
you.
about like permaculture and ecology and forest systems, because a lot of the times it's all relative across the board, you know. And speaking of pigs, is one thing I want to share about pigs. Is one thing that we're doing is when we do our plantings, we put these logs together. We use a lot of logs, yeah, and we make these big log triangles.
Oh, right.
And the log triangles are not only to keep the chickens out, which the chickens, like we talked about, are ridiculous. You turn your back on them and they're going to rip apart everything. So the wood keeps that all together, but the triangle keeps the pigs out, because the pigs will come over here and will eat whatever you just put in the ground as far as fertilizers or anything like that, you know. So that will keep them just at bay enough to deter them from just getting inside of your planting. Yeah. I was just talking today about how at one of the last farms I was working at, the pigs were just going down and down and down and down and down the turmeric rows, just eating all the fertilizer off the top of the turmeric rows. Thousands of dollars of like bone meal and blood meal just licked up by the pigs.
Wow.
So that's why if you put it underneath the logs, they can't do that.
We have deer and
Tricks and
squirrels, and deer can be an issue. They'll
Yeah.
come and eat your baby
I
stars.
hear about
Oh yes, we're very grateful. We have some issues in the garden,
Right.
centipedes and pigs, and now we have parrots coming in, which is very concerning about our fruit,
You said that.
our tree-borne fruit. But compared with
Right, deer.
other thing, gophers and all that, oh my gosh, we're so lucky.
Yeah.
We don't have.
Fruit flies is a big one for us over here, because we don't have a winter to bring everything down to the ground, you know, as far as the bugs. But again, like our gilding systems and stuff like that, I think will help with that, as far as just make things rot away faster and kind of keep the bugs from having so much access to all that. So
Things grow so fast here and rot so fast.
ridiculously fast. Oh my
Y'all are
god.
mulching sometimes, yeah, with like, I guess you do like a more digested layer down low, and then you get more carbonous as you go up, right? And I'm just like, wait,
We try.
that's like California when it doesn't rain for many months in the summer. Like you might not necessarily do it that way, like because it's not gonna break down as fast.
Oh,
It's
it'll
like,
break down.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking.
Can't keep it. You can't have enough mulch almost here unless you own your own chipper shredder.
Right, and
But-
forest.
Yeah, and forest to chop up.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to be creative in that way. Living mulch, living ground covers that we talked about before.
Yeah.
And yeah, grow as much as you can on site. Make friends with your local tree trimmers.
Yeah.
And just work as fast as you can, because yeah, in the tropics it all melts away before you know it.
Back in the day, we had access to a silly amount of mulch and some big machines for just a small amount of time, and we put down just like monster rings of mulch around these trees. And I don't know how long it took. I don't remember when they disappeared, but they just completely melted away, and now there's just a fat black layer under a few of those nice trees that we took care of. And man, it's amazing.
But nothing under some other ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's
That had like 2 feet of mulch on
and
them.
gone. Yeah, but I mean, we throw down a lot of biomass. We're always throwing down a lot of
We're
wood.
like peeling off the banana leaves too, right?
Yeah, we use a lot of banana logs too. If we don't have access to some good wood, and these guys run around and pirate a lot of the logs from
Falling up the
yeah that people have dropped. So we're always on the hunt for some good wood. And if we don't, we use banana logs, because when we make our guilds, we use the logs as our borders, and then we plant the comfrey behind. Because like we were saying, these crazy vine running snake grasses will run into our guilds. So the logs help put down a barrier before the comfrey actually becomes a barrier. So we have a little pre-thought in there, and the banana logs will slowly just down into a flat liquid mass.
And the worms love them.
And the worms love them. And it's great. And then the comfrey covers them up, and you'll never even know they're there. And then they keep everything hydrated in that meantime. So
Yeah. And if you don't want to use cardboard or you don't have it, banana logs are the best.
banana logs, yeah, you need a lot of banana logs and leaves. But yeah, bananas are an amazing thing. They are really fantastic at building soil. They're extremely hungry, but they hold a lot of water, and they're one of the best plants, I would think, for creating soil in a successional manner. One of my heroes, Ernst Grolsch, he's a Swedish farmer in Brazil. He's doing amazing work. He's buying up big swaths of devastated jungle, and that is, just been ripped apart and used for proper cattle and soya and all. And he's planting bananas, and he successions it into cacao, and he uses actually the eucalyptus as his pioneer tree. And by the time he's finished, he's bringing back like water, like rivers, and restoring whole hydrological cycles. And I think he has something ridiculously big under production. I want to say like something like a few hundred acres in production in this system. And
Wow.
yeah, he's doing dehydrated bananas and cacao, and his cacao is like some of the most sought after stuff because his soil is like alive, So, but his big thing is with bananas. He's using bananas and he's going at them with a chainsaw, So he's on a different level of chopping up bananas than we're at. But we're taking notes, We're definitely getting bigger with the banana game.
So many varieties of bananas.
Yeah.
So
I
much.
had no idea.
Well, we want to let people know too. You can see what we're doing at our website. We've got a great website, KauaiFoodForest.org. We've recently updated our plant lists, and we have a bunch of great photos and a handful of videos showing the food forest. If you can't make it out to Kauai yourself, or if you just want to be inspired for a visit to Kauai, check out our website. And
We have a plant list of every plant that's here.
we have a plant list. We have, I think, 4 or 5 plant lists of all of the plants that we so far have designated as like useful to us. There's a small number that just existed on the site already that we put. But most of the plants and varieties are the ones that we introduced to the system. We have just over 200 species and varieties right now, and we're adding more all the time. We'll have another 3 or 4 after tomorrow morning's planting. And some of these plants are annuals that we've planted in the past and are coming back out of our seed storage. And other ones are brand new, like the Oyuko I mentioned, and others. So be inspired. Wherever you live, it's going to be a different mix of plants. It's going to be another opportunity. But maybe through what you see and how much fun you see us having in the photos and pictures of so many of the great meals that we've had, you'll be inspired to consider making a food forest yourself, whether it be just a backyard project or if it's something with the community on a larger piece of land, like we've had the rare and special opportunity to do here up on the North Shore of Kauai.
Yeah, I've been really inspired to see how y'all have been doing it here. Yeah, I mean, I'm just coming from this permaculture thing, and I've worked on farms over the years that integrated it, and it's been in my life, but I've never done like the official PDC. But just like taking a lot of conceptual stuff, some hands-on stuff, and then being like, okay, now I'm seeing how y'all are doing it here in this environment, and it's just like, and then integrating the cultural and community aspects to it too is really cool. I'm ready to I mean, I'm on the road right now and doing this project, but I have a lot of seeds planted too. I mean, everywhere I go, I get some seeds planted. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping other people, by hearing this, will also.
Well, when you slow down long enough to begin to tend the land in a more perennial fashion, you've been a great help to us here.
Yeah,
and
thank you for showing up.
everywhere you visit on your travels, I'm sure the people will be happy for you to be part of their community for a time. When you decide to slow down, we'd be thrilled if some of what we have demonstrated here could inspire you in your long-term relationship. Or maybe you'll travel forever, who knows?
Well, I farmed for years and then been nomadic, and I'm like, I really miss that.
Yeah.
Doing that again. But I really like how there's cucurbits growing up trees. I'm like, I could do that in Virginia or North Carolina.
Yeah.
You could put gourds growing up a tree.
Heck
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, sometimes people trellis their cucumbers and stuff, but
Yeah.
that's so,
Yeah.
It's ingenious.
Yeah, the Seminole Pumpkin, famous in the Everglades of Florida, is, I think that's one of its characteristics, is that it just grows up trees. And you see pumpkins hanging out of the trees, like, wow, is that a pumpkin tree? No, it's a pumpkin in a tree.
Right.
And they're actually doing that here at the bottom of the food forest
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
been one of the cool things is the squash that we have in here has been reseeding itself since the original planting. So it found its way down to the bottom of our project, which is kind of like the wet section where we have the bananas. And I guess it just started, a few of them smashed open there, and it's been reseeding. And we've noticed that if they get into the trees, we find them a lot easier than if they're on the ground.
Under the weeds.
If they're under all those big leaves, we never find them.
I was with Freddie, he's like, he found one. He's like, this one's just this. I didn't know we still had this. He like put a pink tag on it, wrote save for seed on it. Like, okay, like we can't forget about this one.
Cool, good, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a pretty special thing.
So what is the future of this project here?
Well, I mean, really what I see this as a seed, and I see this as an example for other people and a starting point for a lot of people. And I just, first off want to say I want other people to start, looking at any of the land that they have under their feet as a place that they could start stewarding and learning the seeds that they could start stewarding in their region, so to start building those relationships and start their own food system so they could teach that in the future, because food's not going out of style, but water, air, and soil is going to be the new currency. So that's one thing I just want to kind of iterate. But and again, even for myself, I feel like we're making more and more food forest systems out of this project, between myself and different good friends of mine that I'm collaborating with, like farming and installs, and even Paulie here. We're making these all over our island now, so it's fractaling out in a lot of ways as far as the planting material and the knowledge that we've collected here. So that's on a broad scale. Paulie, would you want to go on actual micro?
Well, as far as this particular location, or even I would say that the Kaua'i Food Forest project put into its objectives was to, or was it our mission statement? Is it our mission statement to design, manage food forests, plural, for the island of Kauai? So from the very beginning, we imagined that there would be not just this one, but that we would inspire food forests for other communities around the island. Even though our island community is small compared relative to other places and states and that kind of thing, people get very localized, and there's a lot to do and a lot to see in any part of the island. So just because we have one food forest on the North Shore doesn't mean there's enough food forests even on this small island. And so we have always held that is one of the greatest sort of milestones or fruits for us, is to see other food forests begin and to be able to share planting material and inspire the ideas and the practices as well. So that's an important component, and yet the longer that any one of those food forests can exist in any given location, the more productive and diverse it's going to get, and the lessons continue on, because here we know what happens in year 7, but if we started over, we wouldn't know what happened in year 8. We'd be building toward year 7 again in a new location. It takes time, and we're, I like to think that in year 14, I hope that I look back at year 7 and go, oh my God, I wouldn't do it that way again. That I continue to refine so much, that we as a team continue to refine, that this seems like child's play compared to the knowledge that we gain, and the expertise and the the exquisite nature in which we can, be efficient in our work and successful in our work. So we need to have these systems stick around for a long time. And this particular food forest is on land that is not, the perpetuation of the system has not yet been secured. The land is coming up for sale. We've been the very grateful guests of the current landowners, and yet when the land is sold, the utility of the land that sits under the food forest is unknown, and it's a good time now for us to advocate for it to continue in some regard. We would love for it to be here forever, for the decades, for the centuries to come, and land in Hawaii is not cheap, and it gets complicated when you consider the various land use desires of various entities and individuals. So it's not an easy thing, but we will certainly be advocating for the continuation of the food forest and celebrating year 7 and into year 8 at least. And this is, no matter where along the line, there's that opportunity to see the harvest of all of the work that has happened. And there's so much to see, there's so much to learn from, even in this snapshot of time. So while we focus on the fullness of the moment, we always keep our eyes on the future, and we invite the world community to support our work and support similar work in their own communities. Mm-hmm. Whether this food forest continues in its current location or not, I think it's safe to say that Rob and I will continue on as food foresters somewhere. Mm-hmm. And Rob is really good at putting that out on the internet in the social media realms, and I'm lucky enough to be invited by people like you, Kelly, and others to share the stories as time goes on. So I feel very hopeful, no matter what, that the plant diversity that we care for, no matter what, will be shared and multiplied throughout our community. And we are only one step in the chain of people who have been doing this for millennia. But we have new opportunities to make it more and more, to return to the popularization and making this specialized knowledge that Rob and I know common knowledge again, once again. So that's a very exciting role to play, and a dream to dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Coming here and seeing, I came here like the second day that I was on the island, and between my friend's place and here, I was like, wow, it's so abundant here, and really, y'all have cultivated, it is, and y'all have cultivated that as a hopes that it spreads, and on a little island, there's like so much you can do, and then the collection of islands and all these other places in the world. So yeah, it's a little microcosm for something so much bigger that can happen.
I feel like that's just what humans need. They just need examples. We're good at copying. Yeah. It's just, you gotta put your teeth toward the grindstone to be able to get the examples out. Yeah. So we've been lucky enough to, I feel like, to set up one of the examples for our island, at least in our kind of climate and region. And with this example, this is our test tube. From out of this, we could pour out so many different kinds of systems for different kinds of, designs or whatever you're trying to do. But we formulated something here, and I hope that we could have other people step into it and start to be, stewards and take what we've learned, because it's that time.
Yeah, it is like for us to be doing this with the land right now, with the way things are. It's just like, it's important.
Yes, absolutely.
Crucial.
Is there anything else else y'all want to share about the project, or also other
Well,
resources?
it's happening early tomorrow morning.
Yep,
so
tomorrow morning we start at 9
I
o'clock.
know, it's like 7:30.
Time to get some rest.
Time to go to bed. Time to
But
eat
it's
dinner.
really been nice to reflect on it with you. And,
Yeah.
when we show up tomorrow, having you invite us to sort of reflect on those key components of why we do it and where we've come from and where we're headed, I feel inspired, and I'm excited for another day in the forest tomorrow. We're putting in a lot of beloved plants and nurturing some of the babies that we've put in over the past couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to mentoring somebody in some watering so that I can take a break, watering in our new babies and seeing the trees. So we actually have deciduous trees in the forest that have lost their leaves, but they're re-leafing out now. Even in a subtropical environment, we have that habit in some of our trees. And so I'm just really excited to continue on the work, and it's about the experience, It's intellectual. You can think about it when you're not there, but it's really about being in it. Just like any relationship with the land or people, it's about doing. It's the practice of doing.
Yeah.
And it's with great friends and people who just can't believe how abundant and generous the land can be when we partner with the land.
Yeah, this is what we're here to do, be stewards. Yeah, and it feels right to do it. It tells you. Yeah, so thank you for having us and for joining us here. And Kaua'i Food Forest, hashtag Kaua'i Food Forest on Instagram. I try to get some of the some photos out there every weekish.
There's a Facebook group too, right?
Yeah, we have a Facebook group too. Yeah, and please do it and show us so we can do it together.
Yeah.
If you come visit Kauai, it's a really sweet thing to do on Saturday. Come volunteer.
Yes, absolutely. Come
All
get
right.
dirty with us.
Y'all, thanks for sitting down.
Thanks, Gilly.
Yeah,
It's been good. It's been good. We survived the mosquitoes.
I know, actually, it hasn't been too bad.
It's not
nice
too
out.
bad. All right.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, y'all, for listening to this conversation with Paul and Rob, recorded on a Friday evening at the Kaua'i Food Forest. I'll be linking their website, KauaiFoodForest.org, in the show notes, and that's a place where you can find a lot more information about the food forest and how it started, and plant lists that Paul mentioned in this conversation, and how you can volunteer if you're ever on the island. The extra music for this episode is by Trevor Thorpe, and the song is entitled Jaso Fuchi off of his upcoming album with the same name. I actually met Trevor briefly one day at the food forest, and someone mentioned my podcast, and he offered his music right away if I ever wanted to use it, and I figured that it would be super fitting to include his music, someone who's worked at the food forest, in this episode. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will be linking his music in the show notes. Being on this island has definitely left me with something I'm going to be processing for a while. As is often my experience, kind of being a nomad currently in my life, and traveling and jumping right into places and engaging the land and being affected by that land. And in this situation, it's very unique. This island in particular, and I'm sure the other islands in the Hawaiian island chain, which I have not visited, there's just a lot of complexity here. There's a lot of pain from colonization. The land, in a lot of ways, reflects the abuse that has been put onto it because of colonization, and it also has so much beauty because of just how unique the land is here, being such an isolated island in the middle of the Pacific. If you come here, it demands you to pay attention and listen to what the land has to say. I think that the spirits here are very much alive, and if you don't pay attention, it's very much shown. I was originally really reluctant to come here because all of Turtle Island as well is stolen land and is considered a state of the United States, but that wasn't the choice of the Hawaiian people, and the complicatedness of this place is really reflected in that kind of imposition of private land ownership that Paul mentioned in this conversation. And the kind of capitalism that Western culture really thrives off of, implanted on this land that already had its own rich culture and still has such a huge rich culture. The kind of merging of those worlds is really, you can really feel it if you're tuned in here. And I wasn't really sure how me coming here and my presence would potentially perpetuate the negative things that are happening here. And I think anywhere I go that could be possible. So I just try to come with a sense of openness and humility and consideration of all of that. And whether or not I have been successful, I do not know. But I'm hoping by sharing this conversation about the food forest with y'all, it's just one step in the right direction of creating awareness about the complexity of land and culture. And it's just one glimpse into this place, of course, and there's so much more to it. But I hope that you gain something from this conversation in that regard. And I think if you ever travel to places like this, doing something of service just makes a lot of sense. And I have really appreciated being of service to the land as much as I can while I'm here. And I am really sad to leave, even though this is not my home and my place, but I'm going to take it in my spirit. So I hope y'all enjoyed this episode, and until next time, y'all, thank you. This episode of the Groundshots podcast was produced by Opia Creative. Our music is by Mother Marrow. If you'd like to help us continue to make this audio project a reality, consider becoming a monthly supporter on our Patreon page at patreon.com/ofsedgeandsalt, where we have rewards like entry into patron-only giveaways, additional audio interviews, extra educational content, and much more. You can also share our work and give us a review on iTunes. Visit our website at ofsedgeandsalt.com to see what else we're up to and a log of our episodes when they come out. Check out our show notes for information about how to find us and our guests. Until next time, y'all, thanks for listening.